Welcome back to my channel. This is Jacqueline Edwards, and I am super happy that you're here. Thank you. If you haven't yet, click the subscribe button, click the like, and share this video if you find the content useful. So today, I'm going to be sharing with you, how did I break through? How did I break through? And this is so near and dear to my heart, and I just hear the Lord saying, share with the people, share how did I break through. So oftentimes we hear stories of success stories. We hear, people coming from trauma to finding much success, and we see them whether they went on to college and graduated, or they found their dream job, or whatever the case may be. But I want to share, how did I break through? Because there comes a moment where something happens, something snapped, something happened for us to come to that realization that there is something more. Something has happened to propel us into hope. Something has tremendously happened, how we move forward from trauma into who God has called us to be. And so today I want to share that with you. But before I move on, I want to say thank you to everyone who has purchased my book, Mumzai, Trapped in the Mind of a Child. It's on Amazon, and thank you for so much who have already purchased it. I do ask that you leave a review on Amazon. I'd really appreciate that. So let's move on. So how did I break through? How did I break through? How did I come from suicidal ideation? How do I come from so much thoughts ruminating in my mind, and so many negative thoughts and feeling of unworthiness? And how did I break through? So I'm going to take you on this quick journey, right? Because as I said, I believe that the Lord wants me to share. And I will confess, I really didn't want to. It's one of those things that I hold so near and dear to my heart. It's something that has really transformed me, something that adds so much meaning. And so I was like, this is just my gift. But I just feel like I hear the Lord saying, you have to share it, and it's kind of one of those things, is from my childhood. And so I was just like, I'm so tired of talking about my childhood. I want to move on. But I cannot escape in sharing how God is just so strategic. He's so strategic in our healing, in our coming back to Him, in the seeds that He has sown in us. He's so strategic in His love, and how He chooses to redeem us is completely up to Him. But when we come into that realization, it is just miraculous. So I share with you many times in this story that my father took me away. He sent me to my grandparents. I was around 5 years old at the time. And I lived with my grandparents. I lived with my grandfather. He was blind. I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. But during that time, I spent a lot of time in nature. And I just love nature. I love the trees. And it wasn't that I was just loving nature. I was studying nature. I was studying the fruits, the different types of fruits. I was studying like our Ethiopia apple, which the fringes on my cushions here, they're like the little blossoms. And I was so curious, like, where the blossoms go. They fall off to the ground, and we would have the whole floor would be covered with this beautiful magenta like blossoms. And I'm like, oh my God, all the fruits are gone. So it took me a long time to realize that these little miniature apples were coming. And so year after year after year, I would just watch the blossoms, and I would watch the fruits come to fruition. And then you're enjoying it. So I get to see the whole transformation. Well, fast forward, that was just in my childhood. In my 20s, I found myself just going through so much. I share the stories on here many times, that I came to the end of myself, where I almost took my own life. Feeling lonely. I had two children. I was a single mom, dropped out of high school, couldn't get a good job. I mean, I was going through it, that I came to the end of myself, almost committing suicide. I just felt like, you know what, it's easier for me to just go ahead and just knock it out really quickly, right? And I remember in that moment, I thought about the legacy of pain I would leave my children. I thought about that. My mom had left me. So much had happened to me. And I just thought about, you know, who's going to take care of my kids and the pain I would leave my kids. And I was like, no, you got to live. You got to fight. You got to fight. You got to fight. And so I decided to live for my children. And I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I did, because I was able to send my daughter off to college. I was able to send my son off into the Air Force, and both of them are doing phenomenal. I can get emotional talking about, you know, the relationship with my children, and I'll get to that in another video. But that was my first decision. So imagine in my 30s now, I really have time to stop for a second and to look back. And there was so much happening in my 30s, but one of the things I found myself questioning was God. You see, in my teenage years, in my 20s, I didn't want anything to do with God. I was literally angry at God because I had fell in love with God through nature. I had fell in love with God through my mangoes and through my apples. I felt like I was literally tasting Jesus, right? So when everything happened to me, I lost faith. I lost faith because the very people, the very relatives who were taking care of me, who were Christians, they abused me. And so that kind of distorted my whole relationship. And so I wanted nothing to do with God at the time. So in my 30s though, I remember thinking about this Jesus I love and this Jesus I found as a little girl. And I started to think about the God of my grandmother and her life. You know, she was so kind. She was so kind. She was always giving. She gave to the poor. She gave to the less fortunate. She gave to people of insane mind. You know, she was just giving, and she taught me how to give. But it was more so her life. She was a Christian, and I had to bypass what those other relatives had done to me to get to the one true example I had, which was my grandmother. And so I was like, you know, I want to give the Bible a try. I'm in my 30s. I want to give the Bible a try. I want to give Jesus another try. But here is the problem. I had so many gaps in learning. I dropped out of high school. Prior to going to high school, I must have gone to 5 or 6 different schools before I was 11 years old. So just really messed up. I was able to read, but my level of comprehension was not there. I could not sit down still enough to comprehend what was happening. So reading the Bible became a challenge. It became a challenge for me. But luckily, you know, as I said, God uses what he chooses. And so I had such a childlike love. I had a childlike spirit. And so that's what I did. I started to read in the Bible with the mind of a child and to really grasp what I could. But I remember opening that Bible and I saw where the Lord said, I bless you. I bless you to be fruitful. I bless you to multiply and replenish the earth. And I thought to myself, fruitful. I bless you. I bless it to be fruitful. Now, that word made sense to me. Fruitful, fruitful. And I just went back to my child's mind and I was thinking, you know, the fruit, that resonates with me. That resonates with me. I bless you. And I realized that, you know, the fruits that we enjoyed as children or even enjoy today, they're excellent. They're wonderful. They're delicious. They're tasty. They're like, oh my God, it's so good. But I wasn't at that point. So I'm like, Lord, I need to ask you questions. And I didn't go to God with questions believing that I was good at asking questions or that I knew the right questions to ask. I went because of the many gaps I had in learning. I wanted God to help me to understand, what do you mean by being fruitful? What do you mean? I know the fruit. I've been studying the fruit since I was a little girl, but what does that mean? And so as I continue to really search a little bit deeper, like, Lord, I really want to fall in love with you again. I really want to have this relationship with you again, but I don't understand. You're saying that you bless me to be fruitful. Well, how does that work? Tell me, how does it work? And so the Lord started to talk to me, and he said to me, you were the seed. I knew you before you were even in your mother's womb, that you are a seed. You were a seed, and you were the one that broke through. You're the one that's now coming, and you're coming and you're a tree and you become this fruit. And so I'm like, wow. I mean, it started to make sense in my mind that my life it kind of runs parallel. He said, when he even said that you're like a tree planted by the river, you're like a tree. You're not a tree, but you're like a tree. So I started to see myself as this seed, and I went back to that moment, that pivotal moment where he said, I bless you to be fruitful. But then I started to think about the seed, and I started to think about what's inside that seed, because the fruit is not just the fruit. The fruit is just the end product of what the seed have to go through. But then I started to think about it, and I remember when, in my 41 to be exact, when the Lord said, sit down and write down your characteristics. Sit down and write down your characteristics. So I realized that this characteristics is my true nature. It's my true nature. It's all these wonderful things that God has sowed inside of me that I need to become, and I need to be conscious, and I need to be aware of these things, right? And so I started to write down, and a couple of things that was so evident to me is my commitment to my children. My commitment to them, my commitment to undo or to redo what my mom has done to me, but to stick with them, never to leave them ever, and to just carry them all the way to where they had to go. So I started to see that I was committed. I started to see that I persevere, that I was resilient, that I did not give up. So I started to write down these things about me that no one told me about me, but it was important for me to write it with my hands, for my naked eyes to see the contents of what's inside of me, for me to see my true characteristics, right? And as it just blown my mind, right? Because we live in these societies and nobody wants us to really know the truth of who we are. And so we don't see ourselves as the first purpose, that first purpose, that first seed that has survived, has broken through. You still, it may not even feel like we're doing anything, but look at the trees. We don't know what's happening. A matter of fact, very seldom do we pay attention to the tree until it starts to bear fruit. So whatever you're going through, continue to go through it, because God has a plan. You are the plan that God has in mind. So as I continue, I start to see the parallel, the story, the unveiling of this fruit, that I am that seed that has become a tree, that I have broken through the ground. My seed have already broken through the ground, and I recognize it was through that one decision that, Lord, I'm going to live. And in that moment, it felt almost close to death. I tasted death. I tasted it. And for me to make that decision that I'm going to live was that one thing. How did I break through? That one decision that said, I'm going to survive for my kids. I am going to survive. So as I said, I didn't know Christ then, but as I look back, as I ponder these things, I realize that there were some pivotal moments in my life that has helped me to gain understanding and knowledge. And so As I move forward, I'm going to share more information on what happens now when I recognize, and what I recognize that I have broken through. I have broken through. I've persevered, and I'm coming, and I'm coming, and I'm coming. And so I just pray that this so far has blessed you, that no matter where you are in this season, understand that you survived. You are still here. You are God's purpose. He is dependent on you to continue to push through. God has so much more for you. It's not outside of you. Nothing is outside of you. God himself will shape you and mold you, but just go within you to find out what are your characteristics, what are the things that God has placed in you, what are the ways he's loving you. Oh, these are love. They are love seeds. They're just waiting to be activated by saying, I'm going to live to see who I am going to become. I'm going to live to see the fruit, to see the seeds germinating to become this a massive tree. I am going to live to see God has placed so much in me, in you, so you can see who you will become. So my friends, I hope that this encourage you. My story of how I broke through is trusting, is believing in making that decision that I'm not just going to be alive, but I'm going to live. I'm going to live to share my testimony and encourage you. So I pray that God bless you. I pray that God will keep you and make his face to shine beautifully up on you. So until next time, the story continues, because I'm going to show you how we multiply and replenish the earth. God bless you. Until next time, take good care.